Columbia
or Greenville?
That's right, we're doing a direct comparison of Columbia versus Greenville. Something that you guys ask me so often, I see in Facebook forums across the area. How do they compare? Which is better? We're gonna dive into the things that you ask about most. The school ratings, the crime, the weather, and so much more. Give you a better idea of how they directly compare. And maybe I'm gonna take a field trip up to Greenville, give you a little more insight. So let's dive in, Columbia versus Greenville. Now, while much of this comes down to personal perspective, there are many things that separate the two. And in this video, I'm going to directly compare the two, side by side, with the things that matter most to you. And maybe take a field trip up to Greenville. We're gonna talk about the crime in the area. We're gonna talk about school districts, weather, and so many other things that you guys ask me about. So hopefully help you make a better decision of whether or not Columbia or Greenville is right for you. And some of these things may surprise you because I've seen things online that people post that aren't entirely accurate. And just for starters, I'll tell you our main reason as why we chose the Midlands, why we chose the Columbia suburbs. As you will see, they're very comparable when it comes to a lot of things. For us, it was mainly 2 hours to the beach. That's right, we are very much beach people. We love the beach, and we can take day trips. I know you're gonna tell me I'm crazy when I say day trips, but we do take day trips to the beach from here in Columbia, where in Greenville, that drive was just that much further where it just didn't make sense. So that was the biggest reason for us. But either way, let's dive into those things. We'll start with the basics. Population. So in the 2021 census for the city center itself, so Greenville comes in at 72,095. Columbia City Center came in at 137,541. And just for reference, Charleston's at 151,612. Now let's talk counties, because most of you, from what I hear, are not looking at living in the city centers, right? You're looking at those suburbs all around the area. So Greenville's two biggest counties downtown are going to be Greenville County and Spartanburg County. Greenville County comes in at 533,834. And Spartanburg County comes in at 335,864. So the main counties here that people are relocating to around Columbia are Richland County and Lexington County. Richland County came in at 418,307. Lexington County came in at 300,137. So in Columbia, in the main counties, we're about 150,000 smaller in population than Greenville. And we'll talk about this more later. Now, before I dive into the big things, the ones that you guys truly care about, as someone who personally relocated here back in 2015, I personally know how challenging it is to try and go at this alone. I mean, you're looking at homes online, you're thankfully watching videos like these and trying to find that best home and area for your family. Well, as a real estate agent, my team and I have literally been helping people from all over the country. So feel free to give us a call or shoot us a message on our website. That way, you don't have to go at this alone. And while yes, I am located right here in the Midlands of South Carolina in the Columbia region, if you do decide that Greenville or any of the other areas around the state are for you, let me know, as I do know agents in all these areas. All right, so now let's compare directly between the two. And we're gonna get kicked off with the downtowns. How do Columbia and Greenville's downtowns compare? Now, before I get started, it's been said many times that between 2010 and 2020, Columbia's population grew about 6%, where Greenville in that same time period went up about 21%. In comparison, to give you an idea, Charleston, who has actually been ranked as one of the top relocation destination for a few years, grew about 25%. So Columbia itself has just been lagging compared to the growth to these other areas, which equates to a lack of growth in the downtown. Getting a little ahead of myself here, but thankfully Columbia has noticed this and has been taking a lot of strides in recent years to entice businesses to come. But we'll talk about that a little bit more, as well as we'll talk about the economy side in a completely different section. But comparing them either way, let's talk about first the food scene. Now, I will say, for my foodies, in the state of South Carolina, there are 0 Michelin star restaurants. Sorry, I hate to tell you that, but we just don't have them here at this point. Now, even with that said, TripAdvisor has their rating scale. And when it comes to 5-star restaurants, we both have a comparable amount. Now, most of the ones that I see There's probably 1 or 2 that are actually 5-star. The rest, it's like my friends just filled it out and made me a 5-star. And the 4-star, again, very comparable. And with that said, we both have a lot of diversity of styles, foods, and restaurants. We actually share some restaurants in common as well. Places like Hall's Chop House, local to South Carolina here. We have one in Columbia as well up here in Greenville. And so a lot of diversity when it comes to that. Now, obviously, that's just reading stats online. And I know for a lot of people, foodies, it dives into more than just what the stats and the reviews are saying. And so, again, I haven't really toured the Greenville area food scene as much. So maybe there's someone in the comments that can dive in, that have eaten at both and can give a better idea of that. Because again, right now, at least, it seems like they compare. Now, with that said, there's obviously a lot more things that make up a downtown than just the food scene. With all that said, Columbia's downtown has had a massive growth over the last few years. We moved there in 2015, and seeing how much has come to Main Street since then is just crazy. You have the Grand, the bowling alley with the restaurant inside, as well as tons of different restaurants coming to the area. Change that dynamic a lot. As well, heading down Divine Street, past 5 Points. So many different restaurants coming to that area as well. And then the big one is what's happened to the Riverfront District right there on the other side of the bridge in West Columbia. Right there, the expansion of the Three Rivers Greenway, making massive biking, running, and trails just keep going for miles. And recently, the announcement of the revitalization of Finlay Park that's gonna completely change that dynamic there. So it's amazing what's happened in Columbia itself in the last couple years. But even with all of that said, Greenville is just steps ahead when it comes to their downtown. I mean, even right here where I stand, Falls Park on Reedy, phenomenal with the attached Swamp Rabbit Trail that runs all around the area, the Unity Park that they recently built, and then you're talking about all the shops and restaurants downtown here. We do have matching Hall's Chop House here as well, but it just expands so much further than Columbia's, all the different areas and all the different sections. If you haven't been down here, you really got to check it out. And that's why on this one, I have to say I'm giving the edge and the win to Greenville. And another positive for Greenville I noticed right away, most of their downtown streets have free 2-hour parking. They were ticketing people, so make sure you're doing your timer. We're downtown here in Columbia, got a lot of meters and parking garages. There are some areas that don't, but most of it, I do see the parking meter. So big positive there for Greenville, free parking. All right, let's talk schools. Greenville versus Columbia. So according to niche.com, and obviously there's a ton of sites out there, but this is where I pulled the data from. The top school districts in South Carolina. Number 2 is Lexington Richland School District 5, right here in Columbia. Number 4, Lexington School District 1, right here in Columbia. Number 5, Anderson School District in the upstate. And just outside the top 5 is number 6 at Spartanburg County School District number 6 in the upstate. Now, with that said, because obviously you probably thought you knew where I was going with that one, you aren't going to school at the district, right? You're going to be zoned for a specific school within that district that make up that overall rating. Now, with that said, depending on what site you look at and what grade your kids are in, Greenville and Columbia truly battle it out in the top 10. And I'm honestly not going to be able to call a clear winner of this, especially because school rating systems use criteria that you may or may not agree with. I've heard this from some of you. And obviously you need to kind of do your research a little bit more, read those reviews, read those stats, talk to people to see which one stands out to you. Again, I'm not going to give a clear winner in this. We're going to call this one a tie, because they both have highly rated schools right here in the state of South Carolina. All right, let's talk airports, Columbia versus Greenville. So Columbia has the Columbia Metropolitan Airport. Greenville has the Greenville Spartanburg Airport. And we're just talking about the bigger airports. Both of them have little smaller airports as well. When comparing the two, Greenville Spartanburg definitely takes this one. There's a lot more flights going out and a lot more options when it comes to the actual airlines that there are in the Columbia area. As well, Greenville's an international airport and Columbia's only a metro. So when it comes to the airlines, to give you an idea, Columbia, we have American, Delta, and United, where Greenville Spartanburg has Allegiant, Avelo, American, Delta, Silver, Southwest, and United. I know we've flown out of Greenville Spartanburg before, easy airport to get through. And so that's why we're giving airports to Greenville Spartanburg. Let's talk sports and entertainment between Columbia and Greenville. If you know where I'm standing, then you might know where I'm going with this one. But before we get to that controversy, let's get kicked off with what we have here in Columbia. So we get kicked off with the Columbia Fireflies. This is a minor league baseball team. Now, comparative, Greenville does have the Greenville Drive, a minor league baseball team as well. Here in Lexington, we also have the Blowfish, the Lexington County Blowfish, which is a part of the Coastal Plain League. Now, Greenville has the Triumph Soccer Club, a USL 1 team, as well as Greenville Liberty Soccer Club, an all-female USL team. Right here in Columbia, we have the South Carolina United Bantams, a part of the USL League 2. Lastly, Greenville has Greenville Swamp Rabbits, a minor league hockey team. Now let's talk about the venues in the area when it comes more to the entertainment, and then we'll dive into the controversial stuff. So we get kicked off with the Colonial Life Arena right here in Columbia. This arena seats 18,000 people. In Greenville, they have the Bon Secours Wellness Arena, has about 15,000 seats, so a little bit larger on Columbia on that one. In Columbia, we also have the Koger Center for Arts. It's going to be more of your plays, but we have seen some smaller concert there. It seats approximately 300 people. As well in Columbia, we have the Township Auditorium. We have seen likes of Matt Rife, Blippi, Shane Gillis, Kevin Hart, and more come play here. It has a max seating capacity of 3,383. In Greenville, they have the TD stage at the Peace Center, formerly the Peace Center, and it maxes at 2,115. Columbia has the Comedy House, Greenville has the Comedy Zone. So we're both kind of sharing on that. Now let's talk convention centers. Columbia has their convention center at 142,500 square feet. Meeting place, exhibit, tons of different things come to that arena. Greenville has 280,000 square feet, so a little bit bigger of an impressive space there. As well, another thing for Columbia, while the fair does travel every single year across the state, and Greenville does have the Upper South Carolina State Fair, Columbia has the South Carolina State Fairgrounds, the largest fair in the state. And every October, the state fair does come right here to Columbia. Now, outside of that, with the fairgrounds throughout the year, this venue hosts tons of events. Talking about expos, markets, and more, creating more event space for the area. We both have zoos. I haven't been to the Greenville one. I've been to the Columbia one here. It's a great zoo. I'm not going to try and compare this simply because I haven't been to the Greenville Zoo, but maybe somebody that's been to both can give us a better comparison in the comments to see which one they like better between the two. Again, I'm not going to give my opinion on that since I haven't been to the Greenville one. Now, when it comes to water and recreation, both Greenville and Columbia have state parks, as well as river walks and more. Greenville has a Swamp Rabbit Trail that winds through the downtown section. Lexington has a Three Rivers Greenway that can be accessed from downtown as well as across the street in West Columbia and so many other places. The upstate has lakes like Lake Jocassee, Lake Kiowee, Lake Hartwell, all within an hour drive of downtown Greenville. But I say edging out Greenville again, minutes outside of Columbia in the Lexington, Irmo, Chapin, this really takes up 4 counties, is Lake Murray, 50,000 acre lake that again spans through 4 distant counties. So you do have smaller lakes as well in the area if you venture out, like Lake Wateree and private lakes like Lake Carolina, and we'll dive more into this when we talk about cost of living. But again, I do think Lake Murray kind of edges it out because of the size of it. Now, some of these lakes up in Greenville do come off the mountain, so a lot of people talk about the beauty of them. But outside of that, obviously the proximity to here downtown Lake Murray. Now, outside of that, I'm gonna get a lot of heat for this one, but I'm telling you, when it comes to sports and entertainment, Columbia takes this one for one reason, and one reason only. The University of South Carolina Gamecocks. I know everyone in Greenville will try and claim Clemson, but I'm not buying it, to be 100% honest. Clemson is not in your backyard. It is not a Greenville sports team. It is its own place. Now granted, don't get me wrong, Greenville does have Furman University that has a football team. It's outside of downtown and is a private college that does not even compare to the size of USC and Clemson. As well, in Columbia, comparative, we do have Allen University, who has a football team, Benedict University, who has a football team, and Columbia College, who have a variety of different sports. As well, this goes even further with the University of South Carolina's announcement of the recent expansion of the stadium and the surrounding areas. So that's why overall, while they compare when it comes to the venues and entertainment, because of USC right here in the heart of Columbia, I'm giving this one to Columbia. Go Cox. The weather between Greenville and Columbia, how do they compare? Now, of course, weather is such a personal perspective, but let me give you a little breakdown of it so maybe you can see which one kind of leans your way. So Columbia tends to have a milder climate during the winter, and we'll talk about summer here in a little bit. Greenville, being higher up in elevation, does get colder temperatures sooner and gets more freezes and more snow than we see here in Columbia. So I'd use weatherspark.com to give kind of the averages versus just my perspective, right? So Columbia shows in the winter, their high comes in at an average of 58 and their low comes in at an average of 38. Greenville came in with a low of 35 and a high of 52. So again, a little bit colder than we do see here in Columbia. For snow, Columbia comes in with less than an inch of snow per year. For Greenville, they say the snowy period lasts for about 2.6 months from December 14th to March 2nd, with the sliding 31-day snowfall of at least 1 inches. The month with the most snow in Greenville is January, with an average snowfall of 2.7 inches. So obviously, as you can see, a little bit colder, a little bit more snow in the upstate than we see here in Columbia. Now, the question that always gets asked, and this may surprise you from especially some posts I've seen online in Facebook group, does it save you from the heat in summer? And that answer is actually no. According to WeatherSpark, Greenville's summer average is 89 high and a low of 71. Columbia's comes in an average of 89 high and 70 low. That's right. Sorry, Greenville. As much as you love to tell everyone on Facebook that Columbia is so much hotter in the summer, we have about the same averages in the summer. I'm just saying. So with that said, I'm calling weather a tie. Because again, that comes down to personal perspective. Do you like the colder winters, see a little bit more snow? Then maybe the upstate's for you. If you don't like the snow, then maybe the Midlands is for you. Again, heat, from what this says, is comparable. So let's talk the economy between Greenville and Columbia. How do they compare? So I researched a ton of different sites and resources to try and get a really good comparison about the things that you guys typically ask me about when it comes to the economy and the job market. So first, let's just start with available jobs. So I pulled this from Indeed. And so Indeed showed in Columbia there was about 15,130 jobs. In Greenville, it showed 25,338. So a little bit more job opportunities, now bigger population as we talked about. But either way, let's talk top employers. First, we'll dive into Columbia. So healthcare and social assistant makes up about 14%. Retail trade makes up about 12%. Manufacturing is about 10%. Accommodation and food service is about 9%. And then public administration is about an 8%. When it comes to the top employer, so number one is going to be the state of South Carolina, state capital there, as well as state employees. So as well, you have Prisma Health of the Midlands, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, Lexington Medical Center, as well as the University of South Carolina. Now, let's talk about new jobs that are coming to the area, creating more opportunities. So obviously the biggest one announced is Scout Motors. And they say this is going to bring about 4,000 jobs to the area, not just based on the plant itself, but all the other jobs that are to come based on the growth in the local economy and area. As well, they announced they're going to be bringing the Scout headquarters to the Bull Street district, which is another massively growing area with companies coming in there all the time. So obviously this is creating tons of different opportunities, and people are saying this is truly going to change the trajectory of the local economy. I mean, I've personally already talked to multiple people who are relocating to work at Scout Motors right here in Columbia. You have other businesses coming to the area. You have Service Solutions. They're actually an electrical vehicle batteries material facility. They said that they're investing about $323 million to establish operations right there in the Midlands. What they are, to give you an idea, is a new state-of-the-art, world-class lithium-ion battery recycling and materials facility. So just bringing new industries to the area. As well, Mark Anthony Brewing, who is a supply chain management company, announced that they are building right here in the area. They are investing $400 million in a new facility that they say will create 300 new jobs. For those that aren't familiar, they are producers of White Claw and Mike's Hard Lemonade. So another industry coming right here to the Columbia area. And so a lot of this is creating a lot more diversity when it comes to job options in the area. Versus in the past, looking at it, you know, the healthcare, manufacturing, which is so big in the area, where this is creating a lot of those different diversity that I know some of you have been asking about. Now, let's talk about Greenville's. So healthcare is one of the top industries in Greenville, leading the pack with 17.5% of local employment. It's going to be followed up by administrative and waste services, Then you have the manufacturing industry. It's actually one of the largest in the Greenville area as well, employing about 13.3% of the local population. You have places like Michelin North America, General Electric. They alone employ about tens of thousands of people right here in the Greenville area. As well, you have places like GE Energy, Michelin, BMW, Fluor, Magna, Bosch. Retail makes up about 13.3%. And lastly, the higher education sector employs about 7.9% of Greenville residents, and they are is shaping up to be a big part of the city's future. Now, the top employers is going to be Prisma Health, Greenville School District, Michelin North America. Now, down in Columbia, we do have a plant, but up here they also have the North American corporate office. So you also have Bon Secure, St. Francis Health, and Duke Energy rounding out the list of top employers. What's up and coming in Greenville though? So they say that most manufacturing companies in Greenville have a tech component, which is giving rise to tech business development. This picks up from already businesses that exist in the area with a tech component, including Aeronix, Merit Technologies, Mattel, Cinex, IBM, and Concentrix. Now let's talk unemployment rate. So Greenville's unemployment rate, what I could find, is at 4.4%. Columbia's unemployment rate is 5.2%. So overall, compared to the national average, is good. Greenville's looking a little better. Now, average salary, and I pulled this from ZipRecruiter. Columbia came in at $64,086. Greenville came in at $53,242, which surprised me. Now, granted, this may be availability of jobs. There's a lot of things that factor into that. And with that said, though, another statistic showed that household income in Columbia is 19% less than it is in Greenville. So that is why, on top of that, as well as based on the diversity of jobs that already exist in Greenville, I'm going to give economy and jobs a slight edge to Greenville. Yes, while the announcement of Scout in Columbia may change its trajectory and already is creating new job opportunities, Greenville just seems to once again have the leg up on this, as they've already had BMW in their areas for years. And that's really helped them get more and more jobs coming to the area. So again, because that diversity that already exists, that's why I'm giving this edge to Greenville. Again, we are getting there in Columbia, especially with Scout being there coming now, but we're just not quite at the level that Greenville is yet. All right, let's talk cost of living. Columbia versus Greenville. How do they compare? So I'm gonna break this down a couple different ways. I do have our most recent market reports here, and so I'm gonna break down the average and median price. Then I'm gonna talk a little bit more about this in detail. So I pulled from our MLS, as well as Dan, appreciate you for sending me this. Dan Gomez up in Greenville sent me this report of their MLS. And so exact same time, we're talking here at the end of December's report. And so that gave us the entire year of 2023 averages, which is perfect. So we have that direct comparison. And so let's get started with Greenville's, where they came in. So Greenville, we're gonna do median and average. And to give you an idea as well, inventory of homes for sale. So let me give you those direct comparisons first. So inventory in Greenville was 3,726. Inventory at this time in Columbia, pulling this report, is 2,345. As far as monthly supply of inventory, they're at 3 months worth of inventory. If you watch my market reports, you know what that's about. We're at 2.2 months worth of inventory. But with that said, let's dive into the actual price points. And I'm actually gonna give you two as well of how much they've increased year over year to give you an idea. So Greenville median sales price came in at $310,900, which is up 2.9% from last year. So that's 2023 year-to-date average. Columbia, to give you an idea, median sales price was $269,900, and that's up 1.8% from last year. Again, let's dive into averages. Talked about this before. You can pick your favorite. Median in Greenville, average, $371,633, up 4.2% from last year. Columbia average sales price, $301,625, up 2.2%. So right there you can see big difference in that between Columbia and Greenville. Obviously Columbia, their price point is much lower than the Greenville. Now, I'm gonna dive into this a little bit further because this goes a little bit more on some specific niches that people call me about. Big one if you're looking up lake living. So I pulled up Lake Kiowee, which is a popular lake in the upstate for living. I hear about it all the time. Neighborhoods like the Cliffs and others around the area. Most expensive house I could find was a 4,880 square foot house coming in at $6.5 million. Where on Lake Murray, I found a house in Lexington, a 6,053 square foot house listed for $3.8 million. So you can see on that top end, we just don't have that same price here in Columbia. Now, I don't have full MLS access to Greenville in the upstate, but almost everything I could find in my research on the lake in the upstate started around $1 million just to get on the lake in a house, where here in the, obviously land is different. We're not going to compare that in this, but house-wise, here in the Midlands, the average on Lake Murray around the Lexington, Chapin, and Irmo areas, the prime areas, is about $1 million on average. And it's even less if you head more rural into Saluda and Newberry or some of the smaller lakes like Lake Carolina and others. So you can see how much further your money goes, especially when it comes to lake properties. Now, let's even talk about the luxury market. The highest house I could find closed in the history of Columbia's MLS was a lake home coming in at $3.999 million. Now, there is an active 8-acre, 18,345 square foot estate, you heard that right, listed for $4.7 million, currently in the outskirts of Columbia. Without closing, obviously, still just a listing, but to give you an idea of kind of that top end. Now, in the upstate near Greenville, an article recently came out that in Simpsonville, which is just outside Greenville, had the most expensive listing listed in the entire state. A 16,000 square foot custom home on 54 acres with 12 stall barn, 3 riding arenas, and so much more, listed at $22 million. You do get some of that stuff around here with the barns and the horse stables and things like that, but I have not seen a price point that high. Outside of that, you'll find multiple homes that have sold for over $5 million in the upstate and Greenville region. So their price point in the luxury and just across the board is just that much higher. And that's why when it comes to cost of living, Columbia, hands down, wins this. Your money just goes that much further in the Columbia market and then the suburbs around Columbia. Cost of living is honestly one of the many reasons I've had people pick Columbia over Greenville, especially because as you've seen thus far, the areas are very comparable when it comes to many of the other aspects. So to save a little bit of money, a lot of people just tend to come down here to Columbia. But again, as I've talked about, such a personal choice about your priorities. But if price and your money going further is it, Columbia is the winner in this one. All right, let's talk crime, a big one, right? Columbia versus Greenville. So why I share these stats, hold on to the end because I'm going to dive in a little bit more information because a little of this up front may seem a little bit alarming, I guess is the best way to put it. So according to Neighborhood Scout, Columbia is ranked 3, which means it's safer than only 3% of US neighborhoods. The crime rate per 1,000 residents is 48.55. Chances of being a victim of a violent crime is 1 in 142. Property crime is 1 in 24. In Greenville, it's considered safer than 4% of US neighborhoods. Crime rate per 1,000 residents is 44.44. 1 in 141 violent crime and 1 in 27 property crime. So, on the forefront, overall not looking good. It's a tie and not a good tie. Tie for almost, I don't want to call it last place, but not a good, right? This is looking bad. But as mentioned before, this is where it's important. Most of you reaching out to me, at least here in Columbia, and I assume this is the same way up in Greenville. You're not looking at living in the downtown areas. You're looking at the suburbs around, right? Down here, you're looking at Lexington, you're looking at Chapin, you're looking at Blythewood and all these other suburbs. Up in the upstate, I don't know all the different areas up there, but I've heard things online where I hear different areas, right? Easily, Travelers Rest, and all these other places. And so when you pull up the stats here in Lexington and some of these other suburbs, the ratings drastically improve. It's a drastic difference between the downtown areas and the suburbs. And again, this isn't uncommon, right? I know this from growing up in California. The suburb I lived in, crime did not compare to downtown LA area. And this is the same across the country. Downtown areas just happen to have higher crime than the suburbs that we typically are looking at, right? And so that's why I say you gotta look in a little bit more into the specific area you're looking at. And I'm still gonna call this a tie because again, they're very comparative once you start stretching outward. In the downtown areas, obviously you saw what it looked like. And there's great sites to help you look into crime and help you narrow this down to see in those areas. As well, I always tell people, many times we look at the stats and they can seem alarming, right? As we just did with the Columbia and Greenville downtowns, but you need to compare it to where you're coming from. Because oftentimes when we live in an area and we're not exposed to or are victims of crimes ourselves, we assume it's a relatively safe area. But when you pull up actual stats of the area, it just happens to look different than your personal perspective. This has honestly been the case here for me, because I assume, going backstory, if you haven't heard my story, my wife and sister were the original ones that brought up the idea of moving here to the Midlands of South Carolina. So I assume they looked into crime in the Lexington and other areas. But where I live on the side of town, I often get people that ask me about crime, because they say on some of these sites and some of these stats, they say that crime is not great. But from our perspective, it hasn't been an issue. We haven't been a victim of crime. But of course, I can't say that for everyone. It's just my perspective. And now being on the real estate side of things, I spent a lot of time looking at these charts and graphs, and it's interesting to see how they rank these cities and states based on some of this data. And obviously it's based on reported data. One thing that is really neat about our area is being in the South, you have Southern hospitality. People are willing to talk to you. And what I mean by that is when you go and visit the area, if you see a local police officer, stop and ask them, hey, what's the area like? What's it like crime-wise? They're gonna tell you, because they're boots on the ground and they're seeing this stuff on a regular basis. Same with when you go visit a neighborhood, right? As a real estate agent, it's tough because I live on one side of town. Sure, I sold homes to a bunch of people across the area and, get their perspective of it. But when you go in a neighborhood, ask the neighbors what their experience has been. Have they dealt with this? And I've had a lot of clients do this, and coming from other areas like the Californias and New Yorks, they were very surprised how willing people were able to talk about, hey, it's a great neighborhood, or hey, you got to watch out, those types of things. And so that's why I say you have that benefit here, and I highly recommend it, so you can figure out in the areas that you're specifically looking, how is that crime? How are people feeling in the neighborhood? Do they feel unsafe, or do they feel safe? And so hopefully that gives you a better perspective. As again, this is one of the things that I see online. People say, hey, don't go to Columbia because of the crime. Where obviously Greenville is showing the similar stats that we have down here. But again, when you pull out to the suburbs, things may be different. And that's where you got to look into that. But still, at this time, I'm calling this a tie because they are still comparable when it comes to the stats, but you got to look in the areas that you're looking at purchasing. So which do you choose, Columbia or Greenville? Obviously, as I said in the beginning, they're very comparative when it comes to a lot of things, but obviously there are those differences that truly separate them. Job opportunities in Greenville and cost of living down here in Columbia. And from my perspective, that's one of the biggest things I hear. What draws people to the Columbia region is our cost of living versus not only Greenville, but the Rock Hill, Charlotte area, Charleston, and so many more. Ultimately, you have to make that decision of what makes the most sense for you and your family. Like I said, for us, it was that proximity to the beach, but of course that cost of living as well that really drew us to the Midlands. But everybody's perspective is different when it comes to this, where they're moving from, what they're looking for, and those priorities. Again, we can help you no matter which direction you go. Right here in the Midlands, I do have me and my team that do help people relocate in the area. And as mentioned, we have offices up in the upstate where I can refer you to an agent within our local brokerage that can help you if you're looking in Greenville or any of the other areas that I mentioned as well, Rock Hill, Charlotte, and so many others. Again, this is all personal perspective of which makes sense for you, but we're happy to help you no matter what your decision is. This is where I truly break down all the areas in the Midlands of South Carolina, from Lexington to Irmo to Chapin to Blythewood, Northeast Columbia, Elgin, and so many more, so you could figure out which area best suits you and your family needs. So check out that playlist.